and I'm going to release you to the other things you have to do with your time today. We're going to finish chapter 19 today. Guys, remember that you need to be covering the stocks that you're covering on your own. So be monitoring your stocks. If you have not yet emailed me your stock picks, I'm pretty sure each group did. If you have not yet done so, please do so. A couple of you actually emailed me your rate of return assignments to give some proofreading on. I haven't done it yet, but I will before I leave today. So guys, a reminder too for mentorship day is next Friday. Actually, two reminders. One is when we get back, our first day from class, back from break, are we meeting in this room? No. We are not. Thank you guys for checking your email. We're going to be moving over to Sullivan, Sullivan next week. The room number is in your email. What is going on? They're doing a female empowerment summit here in Schwab, and they asked for this room. I said we would oblige. So we will have a sign up if you forget. I expect a few folks will be showing up late next week because a substantial portion of the population also does not check their email. Guys, and a reminder, next Friday is mentorship day. We're not meeting in a class. In fact, all of your school business classes are canceled, so you can go to mentorship day. How do you confirm attendance that you went to the session? Take a selfie. Take a picture of you in the session and submit. So guys, we're going to start off today with something I saw in the news that I thought was pretty compelling. So please direct your eyes away from your phone. Think anybody's going to buy this? Who here doesn't think it's going to take a lot? Guys, where's your skepticism? Tell me why you think this is not going to be a big deal to people. Yes? I would say probably. I mean, they're going to have to make this something that's very attainable. What would be a reasonable price for something that could actually do this?
I mean, it depends. I don't know how much something like that would cost to make, but I feel like they're probably going to charge about $500.
I'm thinking that's probably going to be the magic price for them as well. So you think it's too much for something to carry your stuff for you?
Yeah, I don't think normal people, just everyday people are going to buy it for everyday use. If anything, maybe hotels or something will buy it, have carry your luggage to your room.
That's exactly where I think this is going to head. We're going to be talking about groups. For example, great analogy with hotels. People have to move things around. Where else could one of these things come in handy? Yes?
Grocery shopping.
You got it. So if you're walking around the store, instead of pushing a cart, this thing follows you around. If you have children, for example, you can attend to your kids while this thing is running right behind you. I can see these things being autonomous at some point, too. Yes?
I can really see them in factories. There's maintenance guys right now that play with little trikes, little golf carts.
Yep.
So you could just give each maintenance guy one of these and follow around those tools.
It's pretty cool. I mean, the tools are heavy, man. And is this less creepy than the robot dog? Yeah, less creepy and less expensive. So I think something like this we'll see in the short term. Yes?
This has with the price point. I actually don't know. But how much do AirPods cost?
I actually don't know that either. What does a set of AirPods cost? $200?
AirPods are they're like $150.
$150? Okay.
Yeah, so figuring there between 150 and 200. If they're charging $500 for that, how many people are willing to pay for AirPods just because it's a fad? So you can kind of do the same thing with this because it's only twice as much. That's a lot more.
Well, who I could see getting some use out of this might be older people, for example. I don't know how many of you see, for example, when you hit your later years, it's harder to carry things around. So somebody, for example, is taking a walk down the street, maybe to visit their neighbor, they're taking a covered dish. This could be helpful for somebody like that. And older folks are getting better with technology all the time. I thought it was interesting. I don't have a direct business idea for it yet, but I think it is pretty cool. Guys, we're going to cover a few things about how the markets have shifted around and the way we've had to mitigate those things. Guys, of course, Black Tuesday, 1929, was the beginning of the Great Depression. Stock market crashed. Literally, guys, during this day in American history, on October 29th, which is coming up, maybe we'll commemorate the day. Stockbrokers literally were jumping out of windows to their death because they had lost so much money that day. And guys, we had another market crash back in the 80s when we lost 22% of its value in one day. The biggest market crash we've seen is still the financial crash of 2008 in recent history, for example. So guys, anytime the market goes up and down, people can lose money. Now what happened in 2000, guys? Does anybody have any historical basis on what happened to the markets in the early 2000s? Well, Y2K is part of it. But what bubble burst? Does anybody remember? I understand it's something you guys would not actually have first-hand knowledge of. You wouldn't have remembered being a part of it. In the 90s, we had something called the dot-com boom. I would write that down. In the 90s, I would write this down. In the 90s, we had something called the dot-com boom. Basically, from 1995 to about 2000, we had a revolution happen in this country. What that revolution was, essentially, was home internet. All of a sudden, people didn't have to go to the library. They didn't have to go to a public place. They could get internet in their homes through glorious, wonderful dial-up internet. Has anybody ever experienced dial-up internet in their lives? It's terrible. How long ago did you remember dial-up?
Probably back when I was 5, my great grandmother had it.
Wow, it was amazing. When we look back in those days, you could get a whopping, if you were really lucky, you'd get 56 kilobits per second. To compare that, guys, your slowest home internet speeds right now are probably about 1 megabit per second, and we're talking kilobits. It literally would take you about 5 to 10 minutes of solid connectivity to download one song on the internet. Watching a movie was not even possible. But the internet was a big deal. If you could put up a website, somebody would give you venture capital because the internet was brimming with possibilities. Amazon.com came out. Pets.com came out. All these really interesting ideas. Well, by the time 2000 rolled around, not many of these great ideas were making money. And companies started going under because all this venture capital dried up. They didn't have good business models, and all of a sudden the bubble started to burst. What happened at that point, too? All those people who had invested in these companies lost their money. And it was a 1-2 punch because we had the early 2000s, we had the dot-com bust. What else happened in the early 2000s? We went to war. And when people are less optimistic, or the times get dark, investors sometimes get scarce. We were crawling out of that hole when 2008 came around, and all of a sudden the housing crisis hit, and people could not pay for their mortgages. Guys, here's what happened. Actually, let me ask you if you know what happened in 2008. Do you know what precipitated the housing bubble? Anybody have an idea? What caused that to happen? Yes?
The banks giving out loans that people couldn't pay back.
Exactly correct. There was a lot of really well-intended lending in the 80s and 90s. And the thought was, in the United States, what's the American dream? What's part of the American dream? Owning a home. White picket fence, 2.5 kids, car in the driveway. Everybody wants the American dream. So we try to make it attainable for everybody. Well, the banks started making loans, made it more questionable, because if you're a loan officer, what happens if you make a big mortgage? What do you get? What do you get out of that deal? You get commission. So all of a sudden, I've got all these incentives to try to put people in homes maybe they can't afford. All of a sudden, somebody misses a mortgage payment. Then they miss 2 mortgage payments. Then they miss 5 or 6. What happens once you miss a year's worth of mortgage payments? Not even a year. What happens to you? It's a big F word. Yes? Foreclosure. There's another F word that people were saying when their homes got disclosed, but we're not going to say that on a recording. So, guys, what happened was all these people started losing their homes. All of a sudden, if you're the bank and you're not collecting that mortgage, what else are you not doing? You're not putting money back in the bank to lend out. You're also, get this, guys, what a lot of people don't realize, banks make money on interest, for sure. How else do banks make money? Anybody know? They invest. Banks invest in the stock market. Banks invest in other countries. And if they're not putting their money into other investments, they're not making money. If people aren't paying into the system cannot perpetuate. So when the financial crash of 2008 happened, in addition to the markets going down, people couldn't make payroll because a lot of companies have to borrow money at specific times of the year to pay their people. And the ripple effects were felt throughout. Guys, the idea of where we are right now, what kind of a market do we have between the two animals right now? We got a bull market, man. The bulls and the bears. But we got a bull market right now. It cannot last forever. The market goes up and down like the seasons of the year. And so eventually we are going to see another recession. It's just part of the way the system works. It's kind of like saying this weather is perfect today, but we're going to get snow. The seasons change. Sometimes winter's a little longer. Sometimes it's not so bad. But it happens, guys. In terms of the way that Wall Street is wired now, we more rapidly respond because a lot of what we're investing in these days is fast action stuff. Guys, companies like Uber and Lyft, has either of those companies made a profit yet? No. So guys, Spotify, has it made a profit? Has Netflix made a profit? Guys, what do you think is going to happen with these companies eventually? They're either going to go bankrupt or somebody's going to buy them and take their intellectual property. Guys, does anybody in this room know last year how much did Netflix spend developing content? Bless you. Any guesses? Just making shows and buying shows. You know how much they spent? Yes. It's $12 billion. $12 billion these guys spent. Check this out. And guys, here's the question I have for you guys. Is Netflix going to survive the next 5 years? Who here thinks Netflix is not going to survive the next 5 years? Why do you think that, by the way?
Because there's too many streaming platforms and Netflix is starting to suck.
I agree with you, because what are some of the reasons Netflix is starting to suck?
They're putting out bad shows and they're losing a lot of their good shows and movies. And like all the other streaming platforms are putting out like newer stuff that's better.
And you know what Netflix is losing in a couple of months? Everybody's favorite Disney show.
Disney?
Well, Disney's coming out, but Netflix is leaving. The Office is leaving Netflix. Yeah, and in November, all Disney content is going to be leaving Netflix because they got their own streaming service. So let's think about it. Disney has lineage going back to the 1930s of content. Netflix doesn't have that. You can't develop you can't develop almost 80 years of content in a course of a couple of years. So what are they going to do? They're probably going to implode. That's the way business works right now. One of the other things that happens too, guys, in the early days of computer networks, back in the 1980s, we didn't have the internet, but we had telecommunication systems that would communicate with each other. We actually used phone lines to connect computers. And in the 80s, we started what we refer to as program trading. Here's what I mean by that, guys. For example, if you want to buy stocks, you can set a minimum or maximum price. You can do that now through E-Trade or Chase, whatever is your preferred platform. But here's the trick, guys. Back in those days, you had to use dial-up internet or dial-up phones to do this stuff. Program trading, essentially, in 1987, started making the markets crash. It was a computer glitch, and basically the volume went out of control. The markets literally shut down, and somebody pulled the plug to say, we're going to reset this tomorrow before the markets completely bottom out. Why should we be concerned about this today, guys? We've got great systems. We've got great internet. Why is this a concern for us today? Consider this lesson. Who's making the decisions these days about a lot of what happens in the stock market? Is it all people? It's computers as well, guys. It's statistics, it's reading the market, it's analytics. A lot of trading still happens today called program trading, which means we could lose our asses in the market because a computer made a mistake. It's something to think about in terms of how we're trading. And in terms of the things that are going to be the big movers and shakers in the next 50 years, nobody saw the internet coming, guys. Nobody saw streaming coming. In fact, here's a question for you guys too. Does anybody know what year the iPhone debuted? When did the first iPhone? Anybody know? Somebody look it up. What year did the iPhone come out? So we've had iPhones right now for about 12 years. It's amazing to think, if you guys could have experienced life before that iPhone, there were smartphones on the market that nobody really cared about. What was the big platform before iPhone? BlackBerry. And the main people who had those were business people. High school students and college kids could care less about smartphones. The iPhone came out and made it cool, guys. And all of a sudden, cellular companies were saying, wow, we're going to get a phone in everybody's pocket. Cell phones were okay up to that point, but it changed the market and nobody saw it coming. And here's what happened. All those carriers, Verizon, AT&T, all of these folks didn't have the networks in place to support them. So you never know what the next big thing is going to be. I think the next big thing personally is going to be virtual reality. To me, that's going to be the thing that really takes us to the next stage. And here's why I think that, guys. Who here would ever set foot in a self-driving car? Do we have folks who would get in a self-driving car? I think eventually we all will. I think eventually they'll become very commonplace. So if I got a 4-hour ride to get somewhere, why not strap on a VR headset? Why not tune out? Why can't I do some of my work in a VR environment? Right now, we've got folks who are training people how to do everything from HR tasks to management to actual manual labor using virtual reality. I think that's going to be the next big thing. What do you guys think? What is going to be the next big thing? If you were predicting the future, what are some things you think are going to happen in business? Any guesses? Yes? I think we're going to see continued automation. Do you know in the next 10 years, what the current estimates are in terms of 100% of jobs that exist today? What percentage of jobs will be eliminated in the next decade? It's not that dire. Most predictions are saying 45 to 50%. So we're talking about huge amounts of job loss. We got automation. What else do you guys think will be big things in the next 5 to 10 years? What are we going to see changing in our world? Any thoughts? You guys are the future, man. What do you think? Yes?
I think like more high-tech personal electronics and stuff.
I agree. And I think that anybody who is getting into the workforce has to be technology competent. Even if you're working on a farm 10 years from now, you're going to have to do something with technology. I think we're going to see more automation. I think we're going to see augmentation of people, for example. One of the things that we're working with the Department of Defense is actually working with exoskeletons. And these are things that you can wear. It's basically small carbon fiber devices that can increase somebody's strength by 2 to 3 times. Meaning the person who is still doing manual labor is doing the work of 4 or 5 people instead of 1 person. So there's still a place for human beings in these equations, but they're going to have to be people who are adaptable. And to me, that's the kind of stuff that is going to be driving the market. I think biotech is going to be big. And you guys can see if I'm right or wrong on this. How many of you guys think we're going to see legalized cannabis nationwide in the next 10 years? I do too. I think that's going to be an entire different industry, and I think it's going to be a big but highly regulated industry. Those are the changes I see coming. And again, I leave it up to your own ethics what you think about those things, but take an active role. We only have a couple more slides here, guys, but one of the things that I like to bring up in this slide, a lot of folks are asking, well, we had this recession in 2008. Whose fault was it? So what do you think, guys? We have people who were borrowing who maybe shouldn't have gotten loans. We had lenders, for example, who were giving out money maybe they shouldn't have given out. And we had government who maybe was doing less intervention than they thought they should. Who do you guys think was responsible? Who bears the biggest share of the blame? What do you think? See, yes, sir.
The lenders, because I think it's their job to make sure that people are getting loans to, or not loans, or
That's right.
mortgages to qualify.
All right, so in the technical term is actually called fiduciary responsibility. So it means with somebody doing their financial duty. So we have a vote for due diligence by bankers over here. Anybody else having a different opinion? Yes.
Probably the industry.
Tell me more.
It's your responsibility to have something to pay for. It's your responsibility to pay your bills.
Have some personal accountability. Anybody else have an opinion on this? What do you think? Who else is responsible? Sooner we get some conversation, sooner I get you guys out of here. Who's gonna help out? Somebody else has to have an opinion, or I'll stand up here. Have an opinion. Take a risk.
I agree with Alex.
Tell me more.
Well, I think obviously everyone has a part to blame, but I think that like nowadays they check credit scores and all that. But back then they probably didn't do as much research and planning before they gave out loans.
I agree that there's blame on all of these sides. I think it's wrong that we say to banks that you have to do lending to people who maybe are not responsible with their money, but in the same token, we also want to make housing and the American dream affordable for everybody. I'm a big believer in personal accountability. I think that one place where we have failed. How many of you in your high school career ever had a business class? It's a rare thing, guys. So anything you learn, where did you learn about financial accountability? Home. That's exactly right. And I'm not saying anything, your parents are all good people, but there are a lot of folks who maybe don't grow up in good homes with good people teaching them things like personal accountability. I think one of the places we're failing our students is by not having some kind of financial literacy in our high schools. We used to have it. It was called civics and home ec. You literally had to learn how to balance a checkbook. I had a class in high school where you literally got a chunk of money and you had all these bills and you had to figure out what you could afford. And I'm betting most people never had a class that did that. It was very powerful stuff, guys. So, we had this thing called Dodd-Frank. I would write this down too. This was the biggest piece of financial legislation that came out of the financial crash in 2008 that basically said companies have to be accountable for what they do and how they invest. If you're putting together a big deal or a merger, you've got to be able to register and basically say this is how we're doing it. If you are issuing stock, for example, in addition to a prospectus, you have to show what your potential outcomes are going to be. This whole thing was basically meant so that people weren't being misled into investing into things that ultimately were not going to come to pass. That being said, guys, it is 9:26 and our class is complete. You may begin your break or study for your other exams. Have a wonderful day.